Yama. I'm Judi Morison. I'm a descendant of the Gomeroi people from northwest New South Wales, and I'm currently Deputy Chair of the South Coast Writers Centre and a member of the Ngana Black Wallaby Writers and the leader of the emerging Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Writers Mentoring Project. Before we get started, I want to acknowledge that I'm speaking from the country of the Wadi people, unceded sovereign land in the Illawarra, and I pay my respects to their elders, past and present. I also pay my respects to the elders of the country from where my guests are speaking. Now I'd like to introduce those guests, one of two pairs who took part in our mentorship program. Sharyn McDonogh, one of the two mentees, and Bambi Ward, who was Sharyn's mentor. I'll leave Sharyn and Bambi to tell you more about themselves, but before that, I'll outline how the program worked for those who are watching. Run under the umbrella of the South Coast Writers Centre Ngana Black Wallaby Indigenous Literary Program with advice on cultural matters from Auntie Barbara Nicholson, a Wadi woman. The program was open to emerging Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander writers living in the South Coast local government areas that are under the auspices of South Coast Writers Centre. The program's aim was to enable two emerging writers to work with paid published writer mentors to develop a substantial project of writing over a period of 3 months. The successful mentee and mentor applicants were selected and paired up by a committee. And once Sharyn and Bambi and Tabitha Can and Rowena Lennox, the other pair, had been introduced to each other, it was up to them to plan their progress. Then the expectation was that the mentees would have a deadline to submit up to 10,000 words per month, each followed by a 1-hour in-depth discussion of the work with their mentor. So let's hear from Sharyn and Bambi now. And can I start with you, Sharyn?
Yeah, you sure can.
Okay. So can you just tell me a little bit about yourself and the project you've been working on with Bambi?
Yeah, so I wish to acknowledge my elders, past and present, who have paved the way for me to sit here this day before you, which is a Yorta. I'm a direct descendant of William Cooper. My grandmother was his granddaughter. So I suppose language and stuff has been there. I've been residing on Yuin land now for, this is the start of 29 years that I've actually been here and supported and worked in with the community. And my son's father is Wiradjuri. So culture and connection has been very important to me as I've raised my sons all the way down here on the South Coast. And my project is the writing of my life story, or memoirs, as I assume is the correct term to call them. And it's really just the first draft of that, getting it started and finding the confidence to do that. So it's only in its very infant stages.
That's fine. Everything has to start somewhere.
Yes.
So Bambi, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your work and your publications?
Sure. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge and pay respect to the traditional custodians and elders of this nation and their continued spiritual and cultural connection to and custodianship of country. Sovereignty was never ceded. And I'm currently talking to you from Bunurong land, which is in the suburb of Rowville in Melbourne, under lockdown. So I'm a first generation Australian. My parents were from Hungary, and I'm married with 2 adult children. I have 2 grandchildren, and I'm a bookworm with a PhD in creative writing. And as part of the PhD, I wrote a memoir which was focused on writing about identity issues, identity-based family secrets, as well as using art therapy to find one's voice when one's gone through trauma. And I've been journaling for many years and really enjoyed doing that. I've worked in the area of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander health for many years and spent quite a few years working in the Northern Territory as a medical educator, and particularly enjoyed working with Aboriginal cultural educators in partnership with them to teach junior doctors and more experienced doctors about Indigenous health. And that's probably all I'll say for now.
All right, thank you. Sharyn, can I ask you, what motivated you to apply for the mentorship?
It was nothing other than the fact that it was there and it was timing and I had an urge. So I've been sort of wanting to write, and I've attempted over a number of years to sort of write things. I'd known that I needed to write my story, or I would eventually write, you know, my journey from, you know, the trauma to a light of my healing process. And it just never seemed to happen. So because of the way that I listen to signs from the universe, it came across at the perfect timing. I actually found it while I was doing job search and it was like, oh, okay, I'm putting in an application for this. And that's really is what it was based around.
Serendipity is a wonderful
Yes.
thing. Yes. Bambi, first of all, journaling, I really relate to you there. I think journaling's fantastic. Really good habit to have.
Yes.
What did you find, Bambi, what did you find most interesting or engaging about Sharyn's project from the start?
Well, there were actually so many things. The main thing was how quickly we established trust, I think, and connected. And I think that was the real highlight for me. But in terms of the project, I think at the beginning, Sharyn needed some clarity and direction as to whether to write a memoir or whether to kind of write a handbook about self-help and healing. And I think very quickly it was clear that memoir would be the way to go. And I just felt that she was a very inspiring role model, having gone through so much trauma right from her early years, and being able to be resilient, to turn so many dark things into light from where she is to where she is now, and continues to move forward. That's really inspiring to me. Also the fact that she was willing to be vulnerable and really keen and intuitive, and be willing to go from the academic writing from the head to the much harder work of writing from the heart, and processing, being willing to go to that dark space and start processing things that hadn't been looked at in as much detail before, which is quite challenging.
Yes, and that's when that relationship of trust that you established right from the beginning is so important, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's great.
The synchronicity of the similarities too between our stories and our experiences. I've been a conscious living healer and intuitive for a couple of decades, and running a women's group, and journaling is a crucial part of what I've done with, you know, anyone that I work with and clients. The fact that Bambi even knew some of my family members and stuff in Victoria. She'd had a bit to do with Uncle Boydie and stuff with great grandfather and things. So it, yeah, again too, it was another one of those synchronicities, and it didn't seem difficult. It just, like, we'd known each other for years. It just flowed. There was that link and connection that we just had straight up, and that was yeah, that was really great. And something I tend now not to expect or anticipate things. I find that sort of can cause you more conflict than anything. So I just let that process happen, and I really did find that it was enjoyable.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Yes.
Can I just say, I don't believe in coincidences. And I really think this whole thing was meant to be, because there would, as Sharyn said, there was just so many things we could relate to in our own lives that connected us.
Yes, and I'm just really glad that we paired the two of you. Yep, that was great. So Sharyn, what's the most valuable writing related skill that you've taken away from the mentorship?
Not to put too much pressure on thinking about the outcome, and just allow the process. I think too, also knowing that what I was going through was part of the normal process with doing memoirs, you know, and not having, I'd only had that academic experience, you know, in the last decade. And that was a big personal thing for me in the first place, with feeling confident that I had the skills and stuff to write academically. So I suppose part of me was sort of thinking that that's how this process had to go too. And I think that's why I ended up stopping so many times, or just feeling it wasn't right. And so it's just, yeah, and knowing that it's a fluid, that it actually has its own identity, the whole process. And Bambi, the questions, I work well from questions. So I found that really helpful too, that I just send the pieces, just to let it all come out, whatever was coming, no worrying about fixing the language and all that sort of stuff, just trying to remember chronologically the stuff. And then Bambi's questions would actually trigger some quite good cathartic things for me, or ways to go, because I'd sort of could lose myself in what I was writing, and not being sure whether I'm writing what people are interested in, or whether, you know, because some of the stuff was very personal. So that really was able to bring me back and keep me on a track sometimes, and also get me to delve into things that I probably wouldn't have thought about delving into.
Mm-hmm.
So I work, yeah, really well from that, with the people asking me questions. I enjoy how that process helps me tune in or think about it, and which direction it takes me in.
Yes, yes. And that sort of process of bouncing off one another. I mean, that's sort of in writing groups, I find this, that something that, a question that somebody asks, it might not even be about your own work, but about someone else's work, can trigger, you know, a whole new way of thinking about something. Yeah. I also understand that the worry about the academic and how the focus on the academic can get in the way of things. When I started writing fiction after working in the university sector, I had to just keep slapping my hands because of the language I was using. It just wasn't appropriate to what I was writing.
And I'm a very big talker, so I tend to write the way I talk, in the sense of my healing aspect and how I work with my clients. So just knowing that was acceptable, and not judging myself around that, and that support from Bambi around that was crucial to me, just not second guessing or putting too many you know, pressures on myself around it.
Yeah. And the other thing, all those you mentioned about worrying about whether the writing was, you know, the language was right. That can all be fixed later.
Yeah,
you know,
and so that's right. Yeah, I let that just go.
yeah, that's a hard lesson I had to learn too. So Bambi, and Sharyn's touched on this, but can you talk about any connections you and Sharyn discovered between yourselves during the program?
Yes, so as Sharyn mentioned, I had had the privilege of meeting Uncle Boydie, who is a relative of Sharyn's family, a very important man, who's the grandson of William Cooper. And he, so I'd met him several times, and also seen a play about William Cooper's life and read a book about William Cooper. So, and also we think we were at the same meeting down in Melbourne where they honoured William Cooper some years ago, but obviously we didn't know each other then. So that was amazing in itself. We also discovered that we're both very big fans of this book, My Place, by Sally Morgan, a memoir by an Aboriginal woman, and also that Louise Hay played an important role in some of Sharyn's healing. And I also have her book, and related very much to her metaphysical thoughts about healing and why certain body parts get sick. And as well as that, Sharyn paints, and I have done a little bit of intuitive art, which she discovered in the background there. And also Sharyn mentioned about drumming, and I enjoy doing that as well. We haven't talked about this, Sharyn, but I do love it. I've also led a healing circle group some time ago, and Sharyn recommended this book by her Auntie Di that came out this year. And so I read that with great interest. So that's a summary, I think, of some of our connections.
I just quickly made a note of that book. I haven't seen that one before. I'll have a look at it, Sharyn.
Yeah,
Thanks,
no, it was
Bambi.
only released, I think, in July. I think it was out. So yeah, there is a hard copy now, that because it was released in the UK, I think about 4 weeks ago or something, 5 weeks ago. So yeah, so and I actually Cindy, my cousin, Auntie Diane's daughter, actually called me. I've spoken to her too in the last 4 weeks, which I haven't spoken to him for a few years. So she actually called and informed me that they may be making a movie of the book for Auntie Diane. So whether that ends up being a short thing or something. And yeah, so that was interesting to find out as well. And that, you know, I'm writing my project around the same time she's doing her stuff, and very different, you know, directions and sort of things, but even similar experiences, just not in the same points in time in our life.
I've got another coincidence, even though we don't believe in them. I've also done drumming, and it was also part of healing for me. So, yeah, Sharyn, what new or improved personal strength have you taken away from the mentorship?
Just to trust my feelings and trust what I'm doing with the writing and not second guessing. So really, that was just to know that the way that I see it is the way that it can be done. It's not that it has to be done a specific way to set people. And it was just the process of, it's not really relevant whether the project gets published or not. It's more about how that impacts me and helps me in these, as a last stage thing. This is like the end of my healing journey, not the beginning for me. It's the end of a 27-year, you know, healing cycle. So how that too, the timing of that fits in, and I understand clearly why that never occurred before this year. With things that were going on with my mum, and just that, again, to the timing of everything. So I suppose that's, you know, and yeah, just to trust that and go with the flow, and not think that I'm, if this stuff's coming up or I feel this way and I've got to push to write, it's like, well, let it go and take that time of those breaks in between and let myself process what's coming up beforehand, so that I can write it without that trauma and emotion. And that was a big thing for me.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Bambi, as a teacher, I always learned from my students. I always felt I got more than I gave. What have you taken away from your experience of mentoring with Sharyn?
Well, lots of things, but I think that it reinforces the importance of the mentor-mentee relationship, that it has to be safe and it has to be a trustworthy experience for both parties. And also that it's never too late to write about one's childhood and one's experiences, and also that it's a process that's different for everyone, and just to be open and listen with an open heart. And there was one other thing I was thinking of, to just not have any expectations about what might come up, and because there were some surprises that I've never heard before, a couple of things. So just to be willing to listen with an open heart and an open mind, I think.
That's a lovely thing to take away from a relationship.
Because there were some things I wrote that were sort of like that they're curveballs.
Right. So, Sharyn, what are your plans for your project now that the mentorship has finished?
Well, I'm going to continue with it. Bambi has generously said that I can continue to email her sections and she'll just read it and ask me questions. So I want to continue with it to get the first draft done, and then with that feedback with the questions, know the directions, and then once that's complete without rushing it, then I'll go back and actually, as I was doing with the little section I'm going to read, that I'm going back over the language and tense and all that sort of stuff with bits and pieces, because I pretty much just wrote it and sent it through to Bambi without actually going back over any of it, because it was delving so much into pain and trauma and emotions and over just analysing and stuff inside my own mind about the things that were coming up. So I'll just continue in that process that way, and then after that's done, then I'll go back and go over it, and then start to actually try and put it in just a easier format, or take out bits and pieces or add things, whichever goes along. So the plan is to continue with it.
Continue. That's wonderful, and indeed very generous, Bambi. So Bambi, what advice do you have for Sharyn now, moving on with the project?
It's really what she said, that to keep going with it till it's done, but not to have any pressure in terms of time. I think it was very appropriate for this first draft to be just like getting it out without any editing. So it's going to take quite some time, I think, to even get it to a stage where it's kind of been edited and so on. But that's fine. Just keep going and finish it.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And that getting it out first, and then not knowing the order because of the things, and so some things, the memories, and then that was the great thing about Bambi's questions, because then it would trigger other things and remind me of other memories and things, and because of been communicating with my sister as well, So it's sort of, some things I asked her about that I didn't quite remember, or I had a different perspective on, or remember different aspects of that same situation we were involved in. So all of that too was really, really helpful in that process of understanding that that's what it is.
Yeah.
And that the writing thing, I just see it as its own identity, its own fluid experience that, so it's its own person basically of myself, maybe.
Right. Well, let's hear some of it. Would you like to read for us?
Yeah, so Bambi chose a bit and I've taken a little bit out and tried to change things because I realised, you're right, yeah, the tense and those things don't sound that crash hot. So, so I've chosen a little bit less than what we had because of time frame. So I will do my best to at least have it make a little bit of sense. So after letting myself emotionally delve into the memories and start to write what was coming up, I did feel a lightness in the front of my body. I shed a number of tears during the writing, which added to the lightness I was starting to feel in some spaces around the front of my body, things that I had been holding for over 50 years. The questions asked of me by Bambi helped me to give myself permission to go even deeper into my child self with the eyes of the adult I have now become in spite of my childhood. Bambi's comments of calling me a warrior is what actually brought me clarity and allowing me another puzzle piece to fit perfectly. This led me to find an answer to another question I had in the back of my mind for a number of years, which is why I was never drawn to do inner child workshops or retreats over the decades. Alongside of this knowing, I found the experience cemented in my consciousness and understanding that this was my life and that the emptiness and blackness that I could feel inside of me would stay. This combined with the warrior comment showed me that I needed to bring that warrior power of the now to my 3-year-old self. How could I have ever gone back to bring my child innocence to me as an adult, because that innocence had been taken away from me before I could even comprehend what it was. I had never really lived a life of a child. I was a parent to my siblings, a whipping board for my mother, and a sexual spouse to my father. A couple of interesting things occurred while I was spending the last 3 days tuning into what came up from the Zoom meeting with Bambi. Firstly, I had a strong urge to go downstairs to my garage and move some empty boxes and give away clothes. I also had a strong urge to make chocolate chip cupcakes from scratch, which I did and ate most of them, which I was going through. While I was going through the gambit of these feelings, I just let them come and cleaned or baked what I randomly felt I was urged to do. I had a very clear vision also to let me know that what was and had been happening to me regarding this memory was actually the padlock to which I was now writing. The vision. It was like I was looking at this big empty room with a big dusty box right in the right-hand corner with a padlock on it. Even now and then I would catch a glimpse of that lock, like a shiny flicker of light out of the corner of my eye, then I would ignore it again. So the memory I had been holding on to was the lock. And now that I had taken it off, looked at it, everything else can now be looked at in the light, put in its place in the past, and all the box full of folders that were now being placed back into my awareness. I no longer need to carry or hide them from myself. I can safely look at and feel all those other emotions and memories which have been inside of me, but inside this 55-year-old box, been hiding in the corner of my heart and my body, waiting for me to give myself permission to finally empty the room and the box in order for me to fully accept the beauty of what I am becoming and creating in this new life of light and peace through this process of remembering without fear or doubt.
Oh, wow. Very powerful. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Well, I'm really looking forward to reading more. No pressure though.
Yeah, no, that's okay.
And we hope that you'll think about submitting a piece for next year's South Coast Writer Centre anthology.
Oh, okay.
Yep, that would be wonderful. So I want to thank you both for joining me today to talk about your experiences of the mentorship program. We welcome Sharyn and also Tabitha Can, the other mentee, into the Ngana Barangay Black Wallaby community, and hopefully you'll meet Auntie Barbara Nicholson soon.
Yes.
Now that lockdown is hopefully going to end safely, we hope. And we welcome you also, Sharyn, to the broader South Coast Writer Centre community. And as a part of wrapping up your mentorship, we're offering you and Tabitha each a complimentary 12-month membership of South Coast Writer Centre.
Thank you.
And that entitles you to various benefits that including discounted South Coast Writer Centre events and access to different writers groups as well. I've really enjoyed working on this program and meeting all of you, the two mentees and the two mentors. And I'm very much looking forward to hearing how you're progressing with the project, and eventually, if you choose to, getting it out into the world. So
Yeah, well, I don't have a drama doing that. It's just like I said, it's like, okay, timing, I've accepted that, and then that's taken off that pressure off me. So,
yep.
and knowing that these experiences and certain things that are occurring in my life are triggering those aspects or that are there for that time. So I'm, into that, and just allowing things to occur first before that section, and fully making sure that all those emotions or repressed trauma and stuff are actually cleared before I move on to the next section, or just into the moment of things that I had forgotten about.
Yeah, that's great. Wonderful. Thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Sharyn
you,
McDonogh,
lovely.
Bambi Ward.
Thanks a lot.